Okay, so the greatest common factor, also known as the GCF, basically means the largest common factor of a set of terms. Okay, so basically all we did was change out largest and greatest because you have to understand the word factor. So things that are being multiplied, right? So from a set of terms, each term would have factors. And so the greatest common factor would be the largest number that could basically divide evenly into all of those terms, okay? Or the largest factor that's present in each group, okay? So we're going to look at some numbers so we can look at greatest common factor. So it's just important for you to understand when I see greatest common factor, what does that mean? It means that I'm looking for the largest number that's divisible into all of those terms, okay, that can divide into all of them evenly. So let's look at 3 and 6. So when you're looking at 3 and 6, we're looking for the greatest common factor of 3 and 6. What you have to do is you have to think of the factors of each number. So the factors of 3 are 1 and 3. The factors of 6, 1, 6, 2, 3. So when I'm looking at my list, what number do they both have? They both have a 1 and they both have a 3. What are we looking for? The greatest one. So the greatest common factor would be 3. Okay? So here we go. Let's do 10 and 20. So factors of 10, 1 and 10, 2 and 5. Factors of 20, 1 and 20, 4 and 5, 2 and 10. So when we look at them, they have 5 in common, but they also have 10 in common. What are we looking for? The greatest. So what is the greatest common factor? 10. Okay. Let's look at 8 and 3. So we're looking for the greatest common factor between 8 and 3. So when we look at this, 1 times 8, 2 times 4. 3 is 1 times 3. So when we look, we compare, they don't have anything in common except a 1. So the greatest common factor is 1. It is very important that you list the factors. You should not be doing it in your head unless you just are very good at your timetables and you can look at the numbers and know it. But in terms of the process, I mean, like, just make sure you understand how to do it. If you know how to do it on your own, that's great. Then you don't really need this video, okay? So this is just my way of helping you see how to be able to break it down so you can identify the greatest common factor. So I'm going to give you a set, and then I want you to work them. So you do 4 and 8. 15 and 20. 6 and 4. Okay, so we have 4 and 8. So the greatest common factor would be 4. So the largest number between 4 and 8 that can divide into both 4 and 8 is 4. Okay? And we have 15 and 20. So when we break them down, the largest number that they share that can divide into them is 5. So that is the greatest common factor. Then we have 6 and 4, and the greatest common factor there would be 2. Okay? So that's how you identify the greatest common factor of values, numbers. Now we're going to do variables, so that's going to be another video. Well, no, I'll do it on this one. I'm going to pause it. Okay, so let's look at x squared and x. So we're looking for the greatest common factor, okay? So here's what we need to understand about the variables. X squared means x times x. The factors of this one is just an x. So the greatest common factor means what is the greatest common factor of the set of terms. So when you're doing your variables, it would be what's the greatest count that you have of that variable in each term. So when we're looking at what we have, the most they both have is a single x. So the GCF would be x because x is what they both have in common. Okay, so let's look. So x to the fourth and x to the second. What would be the greatest common factor? So what's the greatest number of x's that they both have is what we're looking for. So the shortcut, there's always a shortcut, but the shortcut means another rule. So the shortcut is, it's just always going to be the one with the smaller exponent in the group. So we're looking at x to the fourth, and then we're looking at x squared. So what's the largest number of x's that they both have? They both have two x's, so which is x squared. So the greatest common factor is x squared, but you don't have to break it down. You can just use the exponents. And so it's just going to always be the value, the variable with the least amount, which means the smallest exponent. So you just look at the exponent. So let's look at this. Y to the eighth, y to the fifth, and y. So what would be the greatest common factor there? Well, instead of me writing out 8 y's, 5 y's, and 1 y, I can just look at it and say, okay, well, who's the variable with the least amount? The one with the smallest exponent. So the greatest common factor will be y. Because the one with your smallest amount is going to be the one that y'all all have at least of, that least amount of. So if we all putting in for something, pizza, but we all have to put in the exact same amount, that amount is based off the person with the least amount of money. If I can only put in $2 and I'm the one with the smallest amount willing to put in, then $2 is what everybody puts in. So y is the smallest one. So nobody's going to be able to put in less than 1y or put in more. Okay? So greatest common factor. So let's look at when we have multiple. So we have multiple variables in the term. So x, y squared, x squared, y. So what we're doing on this particular problem is we're going to look at the x's, then you look at your y's. So when you look at the x's, the one with the smaller exponent is just x. When you look at the y's, the smallest one is y. So the greatest common factor is xy. Okay? So let's look at 4ab, 6a squared b. So first you would look at your 4 and your 6. So the greatest common factor of 4 and 6. And so if you need to do all the work, then you should do all the work for yourself. Otherwise, you should get better and better with your timetable, so you should be able to identify that GCF. So 2, and then for the variables, a, b. So the greatest common factor would be 2ab. Okay? All right, let's see. So we have negative 10x4y squared, 8x cubed y. So the greatest common factor would be for the 10 and the 8, they most share 2. For the x4, x3, it would be x3. For y squared and y, the greatest common factor would be y. Okay? So the greatest common factor of a set of terms, you look at your coefficients and then you look at each variable and identify the GCF.